Hola, buenos días, bienvenidas,
Good
bienvenidos.
morning. Welcome to this fifth webinar of Kick's Lab, Pedagogical Strategies and Teaching Practices to Face Challenges in Students' Learning Loss. What does the evidence tell us? We want to thank you for accepting this invitation. We are going to start in a few minutes. We're waiting for some people to join us. And I can tell you that in order to strengthen multiculturalism, we've been asking the name professionals to explain in their own mother language, and we're going to ask people who are connected to choose their interpretation language. You can choose either English, French, or Spanish. You can check that in the bottom line in the screen. Also, if you may have any questions during presentations, please use the chat room so we can see your comments.
Vamos a esperar un par de minutos más.
We'll wait for some more minutes until people join us, and then we're going to start with our webinar.
Y ahora sí, saludamos a las personas que de
We
distintos...
want to say hi to all the people that are joining us from different territories. We say hi to Florencio from IDRC. Also, you can talk to each other in the chat box. And this is a closed instance, it's not an open webinar, so we are going to be a small group, and it is very important that you can introduce yourself so we know who are here with us today. We also want to say hi to our team of Kick Slack. They are there in the office. We have Raúl, Maciel, Marco, and also we have Mark with us from the support team from Kicks. Now we are going to start now. Welcome everybody to this fifth seminar or webinar of Kick's Lag that is called Pedagogical Strategies and Teaching Practices to Face Challenges in Students' Learning Loss. What does evidence tell us? We want to thank all the participants and the speakers today that very kindly have accepted our invitation. Now the floor is for Raúl Chacón, Director of Kick's Lag Knowledge Innovation Exchange, that is going to open the webinar. Good morning, everybody. We are very happy to be here with you. We are very happy because we are here in Santiago, in Chile, with all our team. We're thinking about all the coming challenges and how we contribute to the national challenges that each one of the countries is facing. We want to thank GPE and the Global Alliance for Education, the OECS, our partners who are here with us. And also, we want to thank Denise, Carlos, that are presenting their very interesting presentation. Michelle from Granada, it's very nice to have you here. Also, Mauricio, it's very nice to have you here from the SUMA team, from the teaching and laboratory and innovation laboratory. For us today, we want to highlight these experiences that come from research from the national experiences in the case of Grenada, and also the regional and local work that has been done with local communities, with the school communities, specifically from different places and spaces and instances to give a contribution to these challenges related to the um, gaps related to all this. And today it's the World Day, the Literacy Day. And we highlight the need to reinforce all the things related to the learning processes, reading, writing, and from there dream of a world where we have these learning processes that allow us to learn and transform the world that we live or where we live. And then we promote the multiple literacies, uh, the multiple learning processes that should be developed and used critically by the present and future generations. We say that 10% of literacy is digital. When we talk about financial literacy, we want to open our scope. So there is a world that is very interesting for us to discuss in terms of education and educational quality. And we are sure that it's not about implementing receipts, but to get to know what is it apply in different concept in context, to see what you apply in the different countries as educational leaders and recognize the knowledge existing in each one of the local areas, regions. And last, we would like to highlight, and that's something that we've been doing lately from SUMA, OECS, GRC, all the IDRC, to highlight or to give very importance to the work of the role of teachers. They are appointing, teachers are appointing, or showing us that there is a great delay in students, there are greater risks of exclusion, and there are some difficulties that have been occurring in these times of emergency and pandemic. We want to continue and open the moment or the space for the presentations to talk, have these dialogues and these comments and any questions that you may have. We want to thank you all, especially the KICS representatives from different countries. We have people from Haiti, from Grenada, the members of the OECS, Central America, and El Salvador. Thank you all for being here with us, and we wish you the best. Thank you, Raul, for your welcome words. Now we give the floor to Florencio Ceballos from ITRC, who is going to greet you all today. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you well. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank first the invitation to participate in this informed discussion based on the evidence and the learnings processes. That is something key for the educational systems in Latin America and the Caribbean, without exceptions, from KICS, and especially from the work of the different hubs in the region. We have tried to connect our knowledge agenda with the priorities, with the urgent problems of the region. And we understand that it's not a perfect process. We understand that concerns go before us and before the solutions that sometimes we provide. Answers are slower than needs. But from KICS, we have tried that our answers, that our research processes that we support show those priorities, and we hope to continue doing this in the same way and even better in the future. 2 years ago, when KICS started, that priority was considered by all the closure of public schools in the public education and the reduced capacity of the educational systems to provide distance solutions or distance education solutions. Today, the pandemic hasn't finished, but we have learned to live with it. Priorities are now different. These priorities are related to the closure and opening of schools to understand the backlog or the delay in the recovery of the lost learning, the widening of the learning gaps, the increment of abandonment or dropout, and all these characteristics, either by gender and the socioeconomic characteristics of this problem, and also how it impacts the TPD and all the use of that data that is unfortunately not updated. First of all, we want to reach a consensus that pandemic has shown us has made evident a debt that comes not only from 2020 but comes from long time ago and during our or throughout history in the region. And second, but without considering this in a cliche that crises are always an opportunity, is sometimes crises are crises, but there is this chance to look at this with new eyes, to understand, to internalize the all dimensions of these breaches and gaps, especially in terms of teachers for training. So I think for us, this is a very important meeting, and I don't want to speak much more. I want to thank everybody for their participation because this is a great moment for talking, for comparing, for learning. Thank you so much, and all the success for this meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Florencio, for your kind words and for framing this conversation that we are going to have today. And we would like now, in an additional activity to this webinar, we want to introduce Maciel Morales from KICS. She's a researcher she's the head of the studies in KICS in Guatemala, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the magazine of KICS Lab based on education and research. Maciel, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about this work that you have developed with other researchers. Please tell us about this wonderful thing. Thank you, Fernanda. Good morning, everybody. Very shortly, but it's an honor for me to introduce this first number of Kixlack magazine in education, in research and education. This is created from the articles of the first colloquium that we did that was about education in Latin America, where we reflected about the ways countries have faced the challenges in moments of crisis and emergencies, not all types of emergencies, political, social, environmental, in different moments. So the idea is to see what was the notion of emergency from different sides. We don't think about an emergency as the appearing of recent phenomenon, but it is as an idea of an evolution where we see also a vital danger that needs an action or an answer that cannot wait. And also crisis is defined according to Swam that shows that it's any kind of dangerous disturbance that challenges the ordinary or regular course of things. Under these concepts, we wanted to reflect about different emergencies of different origins that are occurring, that have occurred, and how this affects the education in countries. So for this, we propose two different dimensions. First, in relation to public policies in education, wondering how countries build these educational policies in these contexts, and also thinking in how, under which policies are they more effective. So we thought about another dimension related to methodologies and strategies in the room, the classroom, wondering what we have done in terms of the classrooms to face these adverse contexts. What are the most urgent issues to cover in a classroom, and to see how these emergencies and crises affect the educational experience of our students, boys, girls, and teenagers. And as a response to this call, we received different articles in which the scientific committee chose some of them. They come from Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, I'm sorry. And also we included 2 articles with different contexts, and that comes from Geeks Lab, and also we invited our representative from Guatemala so she could write the pre-words or the preface of this. And also we wanted to collect some research and that are related to the region's situation. We wanted to promote a dialogue between the different experts about the territory that want to invite us to reflect on this. And besides the value itself, it's important to notice that researchers not only they expose the challenges, but they also present strategies to present this to face these challenges. They are very solid studies with territorial characteristics, but also allow us to think in terms of the region. The creation of the magazine was possible due to the contribution of different people. We want to thank GPE and IDRC and all the researchers that contributed with their deep analysis, and the scientific committee that allowed us to select the articles and the team of Kixlack. And now I want to give the floor to Rose Miron, who participated in the creation of this magazine and who will tell us a little bit about her participation and her perspective. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Maciel. I would also like to be a part of the greeting to everybody who is in this webinar. And I would like to thank the space because these are the spaces are opportunities to be able to highlight that the efforts that are carried out in the countries that generate scientific knowledge is invaluable. So to be able to transit in this scientific evidence will allow us to generate public policies. And because the data that is being used or being recovered can have knowledge about something to produce evidence. Therefore, we can be very certain to be able to show something, to be able to take good decisions, make good decisions about what we are trying to demonstrate. And in this point, I'm going to stop a minute just to be able to highlight that the initiative of the investigation that we can see today reflected and systemized in this magazine that they are presenting here, which is the Revista Kixlack Investigation in Education. It is giving data and evidence of the region that is firsthand, as was mentioned, in each one of the member countries for the decisions that are being made. And these decisions can be informed decisions. And I'm also very sure that the articles that you are going to be able to read in the magazine has been coming to strengthen the research teams that generated the data, as well as those who have access to the information that today Kixlack is launching in this magazine. And in the sense of the investigation or research, makes them leave behind knowledge by beliefs, which is one of the things that we need to get out of to be able to promote initiatives that are with a base and that have evidence. And this is very important. So to have specific attention for data, for specific data that benefit the population in each one of the countries that are participating in this Kixlack's Investigation and Education magazine. So regarding this as well, I would also like to share with you a research that was published in 2019 that talks about the general panorama of the research and education developed in Latin America through the study of articles that were published by Latin American magazines or journals that have impact and written by authors of the region. I would like to let you know that this studies have 186 articles of research written by Latin American researchers, and they are in journals edited in Latin America and indexed during 2014, 2015, and 2016. And the results indicate that 3 countries, especially Brazil, Mexico, and Chile, concentrate 75% of the works that have been published of those who have been analyzed during these 3 years. And 59% of the authors are women, 53% of the articles are signed by 3 or more people with co-authorship. And between the most studied themes, we can highlight learning of the school development and performance, the strategies, teaching strategies, practices, and also especially the higher education, because the highest weight of the level that is presented in these research 43 they're more than 43%. And also the authors of these research that I am telling you about, they ensure that there is no methodological focus in these 186 articles that have been researched, because practically half are articles that are qualitative and the other half are more quantitative. So New Martinez and Dario, that I'm authors that I'm telling you about, conclude that all this information that has been analyzed is to infer that some elements can be translated in the need of more support in research, a re-idealization of the, so that we can have more collaborative research. And it brings also, why do I talk about this? Because I think it's very important that we, as researchers, as representatives of our countries, can come into this fertile land of research. There's a lot to explore. There's a lot to say. There's a lot to deliver as evidence and as data in our countries. And that is why I would like to take advantage to be able to share that the magazine is a product of the first colloquial that we had, where researchers and representatives and participants of KICS are exposing data regarding the methodology and strategies in the classroom, as we mentioned. And also there are things having to do with political politics in education. And in this colloquium, I had the opportunity of participating as a moderator. And afterwards, for us, the opportunity came up to be able to publish the researches that were exposed in the colloquium. And as I mentioned, Maciel, I also got the opportunity to be able to deliver some words or some ideas regarding the relevance that the development has, the development of the evidence to be able to generate public policy. So then I would like to end inviting the researchers and representatives of the different member countries of KICSLAC to be a part of the next magazine and or journal and colloquial, because it is something that really enriches academically and as well also from the point of view in the personal area. These areas, these learning areas are great. And I just thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Maciel and Rosen, for the presentation of this journal, of this magazine. And I would also like to thank Rosen for the invitation to the representatives and the researchers of the territory that can be a part of this new edition. There is a new edition coming out. And also to share the relevance, highlight the relevance of this journal that talks about things that are so important as education in times of emergency crisis. That is something that is the crisis of COVID came to give us a very high accent on that. But we know that in our territories, and especially in America and the Caribbean, the crisis of the emergency is something that is a constant. So we would like to thank you for this effort, for generating a journal where you can have knowledge available and updated information, and that is pertinent to the region, which is Latin America and the Caribbean. So I would just like to request, Maciel, where can we have access to this journal or magazine? And if you can give us the information so that it can be available for everybody. Yes, thank you very much, Fernanda. It will, as of today, it will circulate through the social media, and we will also be sending it by email, and soon we will have it also on our KICS webpage. And we also wanted to say that this magazine was in Spanish only, since the colloquial was focused on the Spanish-speaking countries. We carried out a second colloquial that was for countries English and French. Therefore, we do have a second number which is being processed at this time in both languages. So we would like to invite you to be alert to the third colloquial, which we will soon be we'll be sharing about. So thank you very much, Rosen, and thank you very much, Fernanda. Thank you, Maciel. So let's start now with our first intervention of the day. Dr. Mauricio Farias is going to share with us regional initiatives and initial, national, and local initiatives due to the pandemic. He is director of school transformation in SUMA. He has great experience in public policy, technical professional, and in transition as well. He has been working in Chile as Minister of Education and in the Agency of the Quality of Education and the Superintendency of Education. Additionally, he has carried out consulting to others. He is an engineer in the University of Chile, and he has a doctorate in international um, education in the Stanford University. Go ahead, Mauricio. Please share your screen with us. Thank you very much, Fernanda. I would like to thank the organizers and all of the institutions that are participating and everybody who is here. We are very happy to be in this presentation. I live in Santiago and it's raining here. We were lacking water. So I am going to start now the presentation where I hope to be able to share some strategies that we are developing from SUMA to be able to deal with this challenge. I'm going to start with a short presentation. Most of you already know what SUMA is, but I did want to start with briefly sharing that SUMA is the first laboratory of research laboratory of innovation and education for Latin America and the Caribbean. Since 2016, it was created, and it is a part of a request of the Ministries of Education to be able to go forward in implementing strategies based on evidence. If I'm going too fast, please make a sign. And interpreters, I know that you need a little bit of time to interpret well. So quickly and briefly, the work model of SUMA is centered in generating research. And I wanted to show this because today I'm going to share a little bit about where this comes from and how we work with mapping and synthesis and how we select policies and programs and effective practices and how that synthesis has helped us or helps us to enrich and generate these innovation proposals that then we pilot or we test them in different parts to be able to see how we can install them, to be able to learn lessons, and then to be able to scale them to the rest of the region. And of course, we work with incidences, and that is what we are doing now, the incidences in the network. The current situation, Florencia was telling us some information. We all know that we are in a situation that has to do with an urgency, a situation where there is the loss of learning, student learning loss, where we have delays, where we have missing class. We have 39% of the students, for example, according to the UNICEF 2022. You can read this text. It's very simple in comparison to other world, which is 51%. So if you can see this urgency situation where we need to generate strategies that can be effective and that also place restrictions of resources, because the resources are placed as well in helping and generating basic conditions, basic life conditions, and they have to do with health. So the question is, how do we choose? How do we make decisions having to do with education policies? And how do we make decisions having to do with pedagogical practices for schools and classrooms as well? And that is what we are going to see today. So I'm going to share with you some of the initiatives that we are developing from SUMA. I'm going to share two initiatives. One of them is a structural level or public policy, the PRISA proposal, which is an ecosystem of resources for the recovery of learning, social, emotional as well, learning recovery. We work with the Ministry of Education of Panama, and this strategy is wanting to go forward in the recovery of these learning, and the challenges that they have is to be able to tackle the loss, the learning loss, with a vision more long term as well, and to be able to close these educational gaps. And in a context that we were saying with multiple needs, with needs also that are more evident of social emotional support. This work wants to cover this ecosystem for learning recovery school level. We worked generating an innovation map for the learning recovery and seeing strategies or projects that have been working in different parts. We generated documents with orientation for the implementation of recovery, learning recovery strategies, and we worked in documents with international experts. And Denise also participated. She's going to also share, she was a part of the generation of some of those documents and with some experts from different parts of Latin America, and the strategy as well, helping teachers with platforms, with effective pedagogical practices, and also documents that help working in these strategies that are more effective and that come up out of the evidence and explaining them conceptually what they have to do with, and also have be able to bring down the information to be able to explain this in the classroom in the most didactic, in the clearest way possible. So we also are working in having virtual classes for the learning recovery in these same strategies, to be able to reach each of the teachers of the country. Here, there are some examples of documents that have been elaborated regarding, for example, pedagogical orientation for uh, the feedback. We also have collaborative learning. We also have for comprehension and reading, and also for the social emotional learning. These are documents that I was telling you contain the concepts and also contain the way we can apply this in the classroom itself. And through a platform, we are working in generating these courses for the teachers in such a way that we can reach all teachers in the country. This is a policy that was sent nationally, and we are implementing it today in Panama. That is the first strategy that I wanted to share.
It's the one where I'm participating. That's the Chaka program. That it's a pilot that we developed based on effective innovative practices in an alliance with Luxich Foundation and with 5 educational or schools in Parinacota, and in the north of Chile we have rural schools and with very high poverty levels, with high percentage of original people and people from, or also schools based on technical and skills. The idea or the challenges is to implement these programs in a frequent and constant way. The challenge is not only that people know them, but to create this challenge in the classroom. It's not only when the program is in course, but to create this deep change in the practices of teachers. And also, we support the school as itself and also the directors of the schools. We also generate these instances of learning processes to reply this model and install that in Latin America and in the Caribbean. This comes from analyzing the evidence to see the effective practices of studies that are done by our partners of EEF, of Educational Endowment Foundation, where they perform more than 10,000, or they analyze more than 10,000 projects or ideas, and they see which are the most effective ones out of those most effective strategies for the learning processes. They will search or they look for these programs that are being implemented worldwide. More than 1,700 programs were checked, and we visited some of them. And finally, we found a program that articulated the feedback, the metacognition, the collaborative learning process, and the socio-emotional development, a program that was developed in Israel, and that was validated by the OECD, and that is easy to implement, and in terms that it doesn't need a lot of resources, but it needs a change in the practices. We need to see some photos. We need to leave or to set aside the most traditional ways of teaching and can start with this collaboration dialogue processes with the students. This model is centered or focused in the planning and implementation of classes guided by deep understandings. We go beyond the objective of the classical learning uh, goal, but this has to be a learning process that needs to be transferred to the daily life, to situations of work with the community outside the school, and they can be projected for the construction of the identity of the individual. These learning processes connect what happens outside the school with what happens inside the school and what happens inside the individual, and that can be projected in their lifetime. So it's to extend those learning objectives and to extend them for their lives, and that creates a motivation for students. We work with metacognition practices that lead to the self-regulation of students, to the strategic analysis of how to face a problem, of searching in their knowledge, in their files, the resources they have used and to see how they solve new problems and how they learn to learn and think how we are thinking. And this helps us to create this self-regulation and to create better strategies to face this process. It also works with the feedback that wants to create strategies not only from the teacher to the student, but also among teachers, from teachers to a group of students, and they can get this feedback and they can have these challenges, create this new knowledge, and provide suggestions to improve their learning and the products or the outcomes of the classroom. And we are also strongly recommend dialogue, collaboration, so the learning process is produced in the reflection among students, not only in the reflection among groups, that with authentic problems, with challenging problems, students may develop and apply their capacities, their abilities to build new knowledge. We work with our partners from Israel, from this program that we found, that is the Barila University program, and also we are working with teams from the Cambridge University, from Sevid, which is the research center for the educational dialogue. We also work with experts in Chile about leadership matters, and also we work with experts based on the teachings learning and the development of this career management. This program creates these resources ecosystems. It works with the teachers and it works with the directors, with the headmasters, and we support the view for change in the classroom, and we focus, or our focus is that this change in the practice is created in the classroom. So we train the headmasters or the directors of the schools in the follow-up, in the we support and we do this follow-up for the feedback for the teachers, and to the teachers we work in different trainings for effective pedagogical practices with all this support, and we provide them with these pedagogical resources and class planning. There is also a platform for effective classes, and there are all these resources also for the communication and diffusion strategies. And to close this my presentation, the delay or this backlog in the learning process is asking us to do something urgent. And for this, we need to be efficient, and we need in the actions that we take or how we're going to use these resources. There is robust evidence that it can be a good guideline for our decisions, and there are different experiences from which we can learn, and we're going to present the evidence for the learning process. We need to understand, or we need to learn what to do and how to do it, because sometimes details are very important. And last, and something that we have been learning is that change is slow. It requires consistency, but it can be done. We can do it. We can create that change. So that is to finish my presentation, and then we continue with the next presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mauricio, for your presentation. Thank you for presenting these concrete initiatives of work about the educational delay in the schools. It's important to share those experiences, know where these experiences come from and how they have designed them. And thank you for highlighting the role of the evidence and for the design of programs and policies, and also to know that everything has to be worked in a context. We need to work from the evidence, and it doesn't mean that we are not going to create innovation and policies and practices and programs that are relevant in their territory. Thank you so much for your presentation. We continue with the second presentation of today, and that is about the findings and recommendations of a compared systematization for the educational practices. This is presented by Dr. Denise Baillant and Dr. Carlos Marcelo. They are from Uruguay. Mrs. Baillant, she has a doctorate in the University of Quebec in Montreal in educational management, and she has been in different positions in the educational public education in Uruguay, and she is the director of the doctorate program of the ORT University in Uruguay. And Dr. Carlos Marcelo, he is a professor of the didactic department of the University of Seville, and he is also a director of a master's degree in the same university. He is also the coordinator of the Interuniversitary Institute from Andalusia in educational research, and he also has worked in different projects. Thank you so much, Denise and Carlos, and thank you for being here with us. Thank you very much. Thank you to all my colleagues from SUMA, KICS, and CHACA projects for inviting us to share some reflections that are part of the evidence that we have compiled in previous works with Carlos for decades, where we have been doing some research about the professional development of teachers, and we also participate in different interventions about these topics in Spain and Latin America and in other regions. And from this cooperation that was requested by the SUMA, KICS, and CHACA colleagues, that we've been working in the last years in different reports to systematize that evidence about these learning processes. We did a mapping of the literature about the recovery of the learning process of students. And also we worked in the mapping of the literature about the effective practices for the training and formation of teachers and facilitators in these learning process strategies. And also we wanted to ground all this evidence in a guideline for the implementation and the design of effective teachers strategies in the recovery of the learning process, considering or keeping in mind as reference what was worked by the Chaka project that Mauricio just mentioned. I'm going to share my screen so we can have enough time and have this guideline for you. So our reflection comes mainly from the cooperation and collaboration with the different colleagues in Suma about this reflection that we did. And as was mentioned before, in the Caribbean and in Latin America, the access to education increased considerably in the last decades, but also the delay, the school dropout continues to be a critical problem that exists all over the region, especially among children, young people from vulnerable contexts. This learning loss was one of the main challenges that educational programs or faced in the 20th century and especially in the 21st century. And I think that has become worse from March 2010-20 with the arrival of pandemic. So what is it that we did first? We did a systematic review of literature about experiences, about practices, about programs that were effective for the learning process of primary and secondary school. Our educational, we started looking for articles, web pages, programs, and we looked for programs at a regional level in Latin America and the Caribbean and at an international level. This information that we collected allowed us to create these guides or to create these guidelines that allowed us to identify some experiences. And if you can see some of the experiences that we analyzed in depth, we collected many more in Latin America, Caribbean, and also especially from the England, Australia, United States, some experiences from Africa, Asia. And here is for you to see the experiences where we have this chart where what we did was to analyze, to see what were the elements that appeared in each one of these experiences, which were the features or why these features are going to allow us to think, which should be the efforts in terms of teachers training, where to focus our study. The
analysis we carried out allowed us to classify these experiences having to do with different categories. The categories that showed up that we could see in many of them. The first one has to do with the personalization. That means or tailoring. All of the experiences that we analyzed had to deal with the issue of having to do with abandonment or lagging of the getting back into the educational system. And many of them had emphasis in the programs in the personalization or tailoring teaching and adapting it to the content or the rhythms or the levels regarding those things that are the interests or the possibilities or the needs of the students. One of the strategies that is the most extended through the individualization is the assignment, the allocating of groups according to their competences, especially having to do with reading and comprehension and math. In programs that has been studied over the last time, that is teaching at the right level, that comes up in India, but then is adapted, for example, in Mexico and in many African countries. In this program, this characteristic shows up with a strength. A second characteristic and category has to do with assessments. This principle that I mentioned having to do with being tailored is not possible if there's no constant effort to be able to know the learning level of the students. In other words, the programs have to somehow have a systematic assessment and a diagnosis to be able to see the level of competence of the students, whether it be with a test or standard scales. And this allows and has allowed many of the experiences that we analyze to afterwards assign students according to the corresponding group. A third category that appears is the one that has to do with adaptation and curricular flexibility. So the curricular adaptation is a tool that is very useful to be able to reach the needs, specific needs, and this is to be able to accommodate the curriculum to the capabilities and the competences and the needs of the students. In fourth place, we have what we know as active learning and situated learning. The totality of the experiences, I would say that if we examine, it can be characterized by methodology that has to do with teaching. And what are these methodologies? The active participation of the students. In other words, you see the wanting to ask questions or the investigation or research as strategies, the wanting to know more for learning, having to do with math, for example, the strategy that is the best developed is the solving. Problem solving that are close to the real life of the day-to-day life of the students. And another one of the categories that I would say is comes up from the previous one has to do with tutoring and accompanying. So you have a personalized accompaniment, people are accompanying them in a personalized way in each of their experiences. This tutoring comes up and is seen under different modalities, sometimes by the teachers and sometimes is by peers, right? And sometimes by members of the community. In other words, there has been different modalities or different ways that we have identified in the experiences. We also see community participation. So this shows up as a strong element and a successful one of many experiences. In some are delivered to the families. They give them determined materials, for example, educational games that they help with the learning of reading and writing. There is a case that we have analyzed, which is the ones of schools Arriba, which is the ones in Chile and other activities and other experiences. You can see that there are activities that the students carry out in benefit of the community, etc. And lastly, we also found elaboration of specific curricular materials. In other words, a lot of the experiences design their own material to offer the students according to their capabilities and according to their competencies. And they have different exercises and different programs for them to, tasks for them to do. And with Carlos and Marcelo, we have experiences that have to do with the liberation of learning, but also with experience that have to do with practices that are effective to be able to form or train teachers. And what are the elements, I would say, that are the main ones to be able to, that I would like to summarize regarding what we carried out? What are those practices that are effective to be able to train teachers that we found and that also have to do with the presentation that I carried out previously regarding the programs. And these are recovery programs in general that can be accompanied by programs and actions that have to do with training or development for the teachers. These practices have to do, first of all, with being able to center the contents in those things that are more substantial. In other words, to be able to center the teacher training in those things that we expect the students to learn. And what are the strategies to be able to accomplish this? This second place, you can see the analysis of the students' learning. In other words, we have to motivate and be able to give tools so that the teachers can analyze the students' learning, the one that they have currently and the ones that they aspire to accomplish. And within the practices that we identified, we can also find the need to be able to have clearly identified what are the needs that need to be improved of the teachers regarding problems and learning issues of the students. Another one of the principles that are in these successful training practices has to do with considering the school as the background. In the center of the teacher training is the school. It is the reality of this educational center and their daily work of teaching. Collaboration to work regarding the collaborative resolution of problems. It can be in interdisciplinary groups and learning communities. This is also a different practice that is very effective. It's not spontaneous. You have to promote it, and you have to promote it regarding or from the teacher training. The teacher, what they do is not so much what the manuals say or the books say, but they replicate the models they have in front of them. That is why it's important that those who form them, those who teach them in these different workshops, they have collaboration, they push collaboration tactics, and also to incorporate multiple sources of information with, I would say, different processes or processes of self-assessment, of observation, etc. And let's not forget that the hardest thing to change are the beliefs of the teachers. And to be able to do that, we need to take them into consideration. We need to take them into consideration in the proposals that we have for professional development. At the same time, this teacher training has to be connected with broader change processes and that they be more comprehensive, that they can be centered in the learning of the students. And lastly, we need to contemplate the follow-up and support. We can't just have workshops and have different practices that are very effective of teacher training, but we have to contemplate later instances to be able to facilitate new ideas and new ways of doing things. And I would like to show you something really quick before I give the word to Carlos. In this graph, you can see that we have tried to summarize from all of those things that we saw previously and the previous work that we carried out with Carlos having to do with training, teacher training. How can we articulate the workshops having to do with this training? We could say that it's articulated regarding 4 big axes. The first place, you have self-learning and guided learning. The self-learning has to do with scenarios in which the teachers learn in an autonomous way, whether it be by individual initiative or through group initiatives or team initiatives. This has always existed in education, but maybe since March of 2020 with the pandemic, they have grown. These mechanisms have grown of self-formation or self-training. And then, of course, we have guided learning where there are scenarios in which the teacher training is guided by external figures or players, whether it be people who are educators or supervisors or consultants. And at this time, we have different devices previous that have been designed. And to be able to end, we can see that there's another pole, which is in the emphasis is on the content or when the emphasis is placed on the experience and practice. In some cases, the emphasis is on the learning of contents or competencies of the teachers. Yet in the other side, we can see on the right side when the emphasis is in projects having to do with innovation, experimentation, of research actions. And now Carlos is going to continue with two more aspects of the dimensions that we were contemplating in our studies. Thank you, Denise, and good day to everybody who is here present. I will not stop very long regarding, Denise has done a great intervention, and I will continue with the guide that Denise was doing. Effectively, that from SUMA in the KICS project, I was given a revision of what practices we could consider successful. In other words, that could show evidence of results that were positive regarding learning, regarding capability of mobilization, of initiatives within the schools, how much capability of being able to involve communities and families in this concern that has to do with the improvements of learning and to be able to get over those that are with some kind of a lag. And then the first part of the list in the experience worldwide that we reviewed, in the second place, we have centered on the teachers. What are their experiences and strategies having to do with training that research has found as successful regarding that have to do with those experiences. And in third place, somehow in a coherent way from SUMA, we were asked, what can we do to be able to take to the schools and to the educational areas these findings? How can we go from one place to the other? How can we make a reality? How can we make this a reality and help the directors of and help the teachers of the educational centers to be able to implement these strategies? So then in number 3, we can see in this initiative and in this report, it was an orientation in such a way that they could be managed by the educational centers so that step by step they could focus on projects that were specific and they were help them to reach to be able to know their reality and know their needs and have programs based on these evidences that Denise previously has identified. So what we did was have a series of layers and questions that would be interesting that each of the educational centers could be able to ask, not only to formulate to others, but also to be formulated for themselves, to be able to give a response to that context, to the element of learning situated that a project needs. So therefore, the first thing we did was analyze where do we begin? And that meant to be able to have a good analysis, a good diagnosis, where we are, what do we know about what kind of students we have, what are the lags that have been produced and what has produced that lag, and how can we promote the ability of the students, what are we wanting to accomplish, and not only diagnosis, but also that if we are going to put on a program and put it, that assessment also has to have follow-up. It has to have an accompanying. So that is a fundamental guide. We have the assessment, the diagnosis, the continuation, and permanently be seeing what we are doing. And then something that Mauricio was saying, and he was referring to that assessment based on evidence, because if we do not have evidence and data, we cannot advance. That second place, what Denise was referring to, has to do with individualization. So in what way are the programs that we start, how do they reach the specific needs of the students? If the educational center has or not the capability to be able to determine strategies that give response to the individualization of learning, because experience says that we have analyzed that the solution is not the same for everybody. Not all students are in the same situation. Therefore, we need to take into consideration those two principles of individualization or tailoring and the personalization of the processes. So that takes us to the third principle that has to do with curricular adaptation. And the curriculum is the tool that the school has, that the teacher has, that the directive team has to be able to accommodate the learning processes to the needs of the students. And there is a determined limitation regarding what country you are in, where it has with the determined directors or capability by the teachers or by the directors to be able to adapt that curriculum. But if we want to be able to reach out to these needs of the students, to be able to be capable of uh, breaking the gap or shortening the gap of this delay or this lag, we have to think of the higher levels. We have to adapt the curriculum. We have to be able to prune it.
In fourth place, that curriculum, we organize it so that less is more. This was done in Chile, but in pandemic times. But it is recommended that we go deeper in them. When I said less is more, we need deeper learnings, not shallow learnings. So this that selects what is most important. So, but it's not clear what is more important for students to learn, but this should be done through a dialogue that should be developed by the educational community so they choose what students require in order to progress in their um, process as of as people. And then we also need this tutoring and this accompanying or support process. And as it was mentioned before, this tutoring, it's an important element of the recovery processes. This can be done from the teacher's point of view, the teacher as a tutor, but considering all the experiences in which other students do these tutoring activities, and also these tutoring from people outside the school, even the family, even also the online tutoring. It depends on the type of experience in which we are. We have seen different solutions. Anyways, tutoring, the idea is to accompany or to support by other person or given by other person. It can be person of the same age or it can be an adult that helps us to solve the gaps. And also we need to talk about this process of not working by ourselves. The school cannot work by themselves if they are not tuned with the others. Schools asked families during pandemic a lot of things that families didn't have the chance to respond because they didn't know what their children need for their learning process, and that has been something very important. So school has to favor the learning process not only of the students but also of the community, and in order to do this we need resources, or resources are needed. These resources are physical resources and sometimes they are more intellectual resources. And the resources that we usually have available in the internet And here we see the experience of the Time Academy, how this experience has allowed that many students of mathematics and physics may find examples they can refer to, so teachers can do this distant support or accompanying. And the last thing to mention, and what Denise mentioned, is how we can support this implementation processes and these strategies. And this is a summary of what Denise mentioned before. And now I'm going to close in order to finish my presentation to see what are the strategies based on the tutoring. Nobody learns because they are told what to do. We need a training in strategies, people that give this support to teachers, also that they are the tutors based on the needs that each one has. So this is based on flexible groups and also strategies that favor the self-regulated learning, the autonomous learning, especially today or nowadays with the digital resources, and also strategies that support this training that is we can learn by doing. So either the school learns or the teachers do not learn, but the institution is very important. The learning process of the organization is very important. So this is successful. With this, we finish our summary of our report. We've shown you what has been done in other countries, and we have seen also a summary of the main principles, and from there we have seen how we can apply them with the teachers and with the schools. I want to thank everybody again, for our people from KICS, Summa, for trusting in us as we've done this summary or this report that is an element that gives us the possibility to think. This is very important for all the people who are in this situation. I don't know if Denise may close this. No, I think we are on time. I want just to join you in this thanking moment to our colleagues from KICS and from SUMA to give us the opportunity to share these reflections and study these topics. Thank you so much, Denise and Carlos, for your presentation. I want to tell you that this work will be available in the following days in the 3 languages. That's going to be Spanish, it's going to be the original language in English and in French. And also, I want to thank you for this great analysis and synthesis work that you did. You analyzed a lot of initiatives and programs in different parts of the region. And from there, from that analysis, we could extract these elements that would orient or guide these programs and policies. And answering to the questions in the chat, as this is only a presentation, this presentation will be available, and there are some analytical guides and can show us this in details, because when you do this type of synthesis, you extract factors or elements, and if you don't know the context, you may think that these initiatives may be replicated, but we need to think about the context first, and also the intellectual effort of developing a plan for the recovery of the learning processes, a guideline for teachers and schools, and that would allow us to think about this. Thank you so much for this presentation, and we are going to continue At the end, we will have one more presentation, and then we will have a comments instance, and you can also write in the chat box your questions. We are collecting those questions and your comments, and we're going to share them with you at the end of the session, so the speakers have the chance to answer these questions or doubts. Now we are going to continue with our third intervention of today, and that is the presentation of the territorial experience by Michelle Brathwaite. She's the project coordinator of the Ministry of Education in Grenada. Michelle, she was the director of the deaf school for 10 years, and now she is a visiting professor of the signal languages of the University of St. George and the Community College, and she is a certified teacher of the West Indies University, and she's got a master's degree in special education. Michelle, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you kindly, and good afternoon. Actually, it is in Grenada. It's afternoon, it's past 12. And I would take this time to quickly share with you, quickly share my screen.
Let me, can you?
Great,
Hi.
there we go. Okay, so the Grenada experience, and as we normally would say, in a nutshell, but today it will be in a nutmeg shell that I would be sharing our experience here in Grenada. I chose to look at the 6 themes that we were focusing on within the concept note. I would try to quickly go through that. And that of the individualization of the teaching process. One of the things that we recognized that during the pandemic, e-learning had to come about. It was the only way of reaching to our students. And within that, we recognized that many of our educators may not have even recognized that they were using differentiated instructions. There were those who may have been exposed to it at the Teachers College, who may have done training, but through the Ministry of Education, when we observed some of the lessons that were being taught online, differentiated instructions were used by some of our teachers, even if they did not even know it is differentiated instructions that they were using. We saw even during the pandemic and during the whole recovery process that teachers were involved, especially in the rural areas, in providing individualized packages for our special needs students and our early age students as well, early childhood age students. We would have seen that as well being done, especially for those age groups. We also had, within the time of the pandemic, that the Ministry of Education was able to roll out with a university within the United States where differentiated instructions. Training was done with at least 7 to 5 teachers so that they could actually have used that during the pandemic as well, during their virtual classes. Even within our teacher ed department, at the T.A. Marichaud Community College, we also had differentiated instruction course being taught to our teachers. Presently, we are involved in a program which is called the Let's Read program. And I say a program and not a project because the intention is for this program to continue within our school where it should be able to help our teaching and learning process, our entire education system, which is referred to as the Let's Read. And we are about to roll out 140 educators. And that is being sponsored through the Caribbean Development Bank, OECS, and the CARICOM, where our teachers, principals, focal points for the Let's Read program. We are looking at capacity building in the area of differentiated instruction, communities of practices, which would begin during this month of September. But we do have challenges in that because there is no individual education plan there is no legislation or any stipulation that individual planning has to be done for students, that this can be seen as a challenge. We do not have the actual monitoring of using differentiated instruction in lesson plan for us, our teachers. So that is not effectively monitored. I also looked at the other theme, that of diagnostic assessments. Here at the Ministry of Education, we have a national competency test, which is administered grades 2, 4, and 5. And the intention there is for us to see how competent our students are in the areas of language and mathematics. However, for this year, it was administered, but it is being analyzed presently. Therefore, I'm unable to present the results to us. The Academic Recovery Program, it's a program that has come more or less to an end. Students who needed support or intervention, they would have done assessments, and out of that, they were able to see the students who would need that sort of intervention. And presently, school has just reopened, so we are yet to see the results of the intervention that would be done. Also, as I mentioned, the Let's Read program again. And then what we saw is that during the pandemic itself, because teachers were not very au fait in terms of preparing diagnostic assessment, there was some teacher-made assessments, just wanting to know where the students were at. So they more or less administered those as well. So we see here that our teachers do require a lot of training in administering formative assessments. Data collection is a problem. It's a challenge, it's an issue. Even if teachers may do things, documentation, collection of data is a challenge here within Grenada and even within the region. In terms of the curriculum adaptation and flexibility, we were able to have ebooks installed for the primary schools, that is on devices. The Ministry of Education was able to purchase or to have access license for ebooks, secondary school, high school, for at least 18 different subject areas. We were able during the pandemic to have, and that was a bit of flexibility and change in that we were able to use social media, television to do programs such as sign language. So that was able to curb that issue that we would have, especially for special needs students. We were able to have Spice Math, which was presented by teachers online as well during the pandemic, during what we will refer to as a lockdown period for us in Grenada. So our students still had access for mathematics as well as sign language and other areas, especially our special needs students. We know that for learning to take place, we must take care of the psychosocial aspect of our students. And we saw that as critical. So our teachers, for them, it was throwing them into this new way of teaching. So we had psychosocial support through our counselors for students as well as teachers. They had telephones which they could have communicated with students as well. We had the development of pedagogical content for remote learning. And how did our teachers get that to our students? It was mostly through the WhatsApp. Even if we had our MSTAR platform, e-platform, and we had all other platforms, the one mostly used in Grenada was that of WhatsApp. It was a quick way of getting to the students. However, there is a challenge. There is no curriculum policy. There is nothing really guiding the curriculum. Here at the Ministry of Education, we see that as a great need. There is a draft policy since 2004, but there is no actual curriculum policy. Active and situated learning. We had lots of training for our teachers through the academic response program, whether it was in diagnostic assessment, whether it was in leadership, and so on. But what we saw there as a challenge is that of reflecting on one's practice. And we heard that earlier in one of the presentations. That is something that needs to be taught. That is something that people would need to receive training in reflecting on our practices, not just as educators, but also having our students reflect on their practice. So the intention through the community of practices, through the Let's Read program, is to also have reflective practice as being part of that. We also saw the impact of the OECS standards, even if it was not there because of the pandemic, but it was prior. Teachers were able to look at some of the standards that was set by the OECS in terms of what are the expectations or the milestones for a child at that particular grade. So that has been used as well as a sort of benchmark in seeing whether or not our students are really on par or whether they are functioning even below the standard that is expected of them at that particular grade. And we found that the early childhood high scope, where they are able to observe, where they are able to discover, that this program will continue, and it will be a way of assisting in terms of active and situated learning. Tutoring and support. We saw that during the pandemic, because of national and regional exams, that teachers continued to have classes, whether it was virtual, and some still tried having face-to-face sessions because of the students having to sit national and regional exams, that teachers still conducted classes. We had training for teachers because there were teachers who knew nothing about using the computer. They knew nothing about having virtual classes. So the Ministry of Education had the use of application and general knowledge of computer operation for teachers. We also had that as well on the social media, on our government television, where teachers as well as parents had the opportunity in learning how to use a computer. We also had within that time the launch of a mathematics task force. And even during that time, the Ministry of Education saw it as important to have IT officers to provide technical and pedagogical support for our teachers. So presently at every district, we now have IT teachers, because being thrown into the using devices, it's a need for our teachers to be guided. So the Ministry of Education have employed these 6 officers. Just quickly as well, Notes Master. We have the development of content in a local context, and this was done during the pandemic and is now available. It can be accessed through our MSTAR platform for teachers. So a lot of the supplementary lessons, they are more or less suited for the local context, and that is being done at the secondary level. Community participation. We saw out of that the engagement of parents, because teachers now were communicating with parents, critical, building relationship with parents. We saw the sharing of videos online through the use of Orange media. So we saw there during the pandemic, children learning to cook, children learning, parents exercising along with their children. So we saw building of relationships, which would make it, we hope, even easier in terms of the teaching and learning process for our students. We saw shared continuity of learning guidelines with parents, right? We had lots of webinars that were shared with them, information shared with parents, okay? Another interesting one was content produced and distributed printed materials, and that was left at shops and supermarkets. And the supermarkets and shops helped with distributing materials and so to parents, so that they would have work, they would have sessions that they can do with their children at home. And amazingly, we had a counselor on call, and this was for the community. The intention was really for teachers and children, students to reach out. But we found that the entire community used that opportunity to call in. It was a live broadcast, and we found that we had online, we had the community calling in on this online support, right? Now, how would all of this assist? Because they are the same community person that were stressed, that had to carry the burdens of looking and teaching their students during this time, whether it was their neighbors providing internet access. So it was a way of distressing, and it worked pretty well. However, because we have denominational schools where the churches play a role, we felt within the Ministry of Education that the religious bodies and some of the non-governmental organizations did not play much of a keen role during the pandemic and assisting with the teaching and learning process. We had some cross-cutting challenges: monitoring, an issue, finances, data collection. We saw too that there were so many activities. We had the same educators, the same human resource needed to attend all of these training activities. There were so many, and at times it was the same educators attending them during the pandemic. So that created a problem in that all of the workshops, all of the training that was offered, it could not have been accessed by the educators. What worked well for us? Devices were made available to all students at primary and secondary level in Grenada. Devices were made available to all teachers at primary, secondary, and special education schools in Grenada. We also had the introduction of the Microsoft 365 for all teachers, students having credentials. We had at that time, because of people had issues in terms of technology, we had projectors, laptops deployed into schools. We had assessments conducted, over 700 assessments that were conducted. We had the academic recovery initiatives, they were successfully implemented. We had over 74 teachers, as we said, trained in neurodiversity. Professional development sessions were conducted for over 59 school leaders, and these were in specific areas. Because of time, I may not be able to go through them. And presently, where are we? What is happening now in Grenada? One, we have the implementation, which is the OECS Pearl program. It is not directly for the learning recovery strategy, but it is part of the strategic plan for education in Grenada. But we would find that this would overlap and it would fill into the whole learning recovery process. However, the Let's Read program, which has 9 components, which looks at leadership and accountability, management and communication, regional and national participation, teacher support and collaboration, formative assessment, inclusion, and the well-being of teachers and students, resources and curriculum, engagement with parents and family, engagement with community and community organizations. And we believe that if we do implement this program as it is being done presently, that this can have an impact on the teaching and learning process, and we can surely have lead to the recovery of the teaching and learning and our education system in Grenada. It is a project of the Caribbean Development Bank, the CARICOM and the OECS, and Grenada has bought into it. And we are in the implementation stage of this program here in Grenada. I thank you. Thank you to all the contributors. Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. Muchas gracias, Michelle, por tu presentación. Bueno, agradecer de que nos haya
I would just
contado
like to thank you sharing with us the context of Grenada and sharing the situation that the country is dealing with and the multiple strategies that you adopted to be able to confront or tackle the lag or the closing of schools as well in the territory. I would like to take some points that I thought were very interesting that Michelle said in her presentation. First, having to do with the challenge of the importance of the abilities and the capabilities of the teachers to be able to do a diagnostic evaluation of their students. This part of the assessment is something that I think is transversal in this region and probably in general, with being able to have tools to be able to carry out assessments having to do with diagnosis or formation, to be able to have learning in the process. So it's very interesting that you talked about that point, to be able to have a view and also an idea of the region regarding that. And also, I found it to be very interesting to have this emergency that you talked about with other educational for example, TV, radio, who also had a role in education that they didn't have before, and also the role of the stores that would give out pedagogical material for the community. And I think that going back to this idea of the opportunity of the crisis, that these things can emerge, that they have a social role in the education, I think it is very interesting. So thank you very much for bringing up these points. And now we are opening up the space for discussion. I would like to start by giving a general comment regarding the different presentations, trying to find the points in common that go through these presentations. And I wanted to start now with the diagnosis that came out in the conversations that we recently had during this webinar. One second, let me look at my notes. So the first is to visualize that the educational lag or the abandonment or the exclusion, because it's not that people want to leave the schools, but there are conditions that require that many people who want to be within the systems cannot be there at some time. There are problems that we have dealt with not only in the COVID emergency, even though no doubt that this has made it more acute, but it is issues that our territories have had to deal with that have to do with variables or issues, for example, social, economic vulnerability, rurality, or other areas, other problems that we have in our territories. Therefore, it affects the right of education for everybody. As a second point, to take this idea that you mentioned, not thinking about the cliche of the opportunity, but it does seem that there is an opportunity here, and that would be, what can we learn from this experience and from these experiences that we have been listening to today? The first thing is that we visualize that in a first instance, or at least in general, our territories have not had the capability as a system to be able to respond to the situations of crisis and emergency, and also to be able to reach these territories. So we could think that the elements and components that are identified now due to this COVID emergency having to do with a school delay or lag has to do with perspectives that we have to think more in general in our systems. So we would have to be thinking now of having to do with something that is much more transversal to our system and not just having to do, we should try through this situation that we are dealing with and how we can think about this in the teacher training. Here I'm going to take a question that we see from Germán in the comments, but thank you very much for your comment. But if we should think about creating abilities or to create abilities or capabilities in our teachers in our systems to be able to build from the territory, to be able that allow us to be resilient systems and that can take on the issues and having to do with the lag of the education. And now to think for those the speakers. How do you see this? How can you see the role of the states that are participating in these institutions that are present in the territories to be able to tackle or facilitate or support in the creation of this capability and in strengthening the system so that they can be inclusive systems, so that they can be incorporated at all time with all people in the systems, that they can also be resilient to the crisis and different kinds that we can live. So I will open up if anybody wants to speak about this. And I would also like to invite anybody who wants to participate or who wants to ask a question, please raise your hand, your virtual hand, so we can give you the word.
No sé si alguien quisiera, alguien de los expositores.
Muy brevemente, en primer lugar, excusarme porque en 5 minutos me voy a tener que retirar porque tengo que dar una clase y bueno, como habíamos marcado el cierre de 1:40, la verdad que no puedo aplazar mi clase y los estudiantes no los quiero hacer esperar, pero respecto a lo que tú dijiste, yo creo que hay un concepto que también vi en algunos de los comentarios y preguntas, que es esto de pensar en sistemas educativos resilientes, ¿no? Yo creo que si algo nos enseñó la pandemia es justamente y pensando en la formación de los docentes y en su preparación.
We have to think in these uncertainty contexts in which we have to create capacities that help us face these unpredictable situations, such as the ones that we lived. And I'm relating this to one of the topics that you mentioned as well, which is the capacities of the ministries of education, of the municipalities, of the institutions of the state. And I think this is related to create these partnerships that in the territory can give an answer to the specific needs of communities. And that is done if we accumulate capacities in our territory. And a way to contribute to this is to create these partnerships and that projects, in this case of recovery, are known by the community, and the community should be the owner of that, the different actors of communities. Thank you so much, Denise, for your answer and for your participation, for staying with us in this moment. We're sorry that you have to leave, but thank you so much for that. I would like to add something to what to answer, and it's a very good question from Herman, and I think it's important to share how we are facing this from Chaka. We see the international evidence. The good thing is that it's that of that international evidence is not only to find the most effective strategies worldwide, but not because of that we take them and we replicate them, but we take them, we analyze them, and we build with the communities. What we are doing, and the project considers partnerships with the different institutions. They are our partners in this work. We're working together with them and trying to adjust these practices. And this first instance, it's a pilot. What we want to do is to take these strategies and build them with them. And one of the first sessions, what we talked about their main issues, their main programs, and the motivation was one of the main issues. We worked, I told them about these deep learning processes of those experiences that go beyond the learning process that is defined by the curriculum, and hopefully those learnings are transferred to life. So what we want to see is like to test if there are results and to have that evidence so we can scale up this and go to another place, trying to work with a similar disposition, trying to adjust or adapt this. We don't want to have preset formats and apply them in a place, but we want to test. We want to test these new contexts that are different with different needs. And in that test, we can get the results. So the idea is to test, to measure, to see the results, and that creates learning processes. And out of those learning processes, one of the most important things we have seen is that strategies are not only for the student to learn, but also for the actors of the projects learn as well, and they reflect about the situations that are occurring. We've been thinking a lot about the reflection, or we have given a special emphasis to that reflection, because this allows us to replicate this with other strategies, facing new situations that we may not foresee. So the reflection, the dialogue, metacognition, as they are very important elements that help us to see how we face things, how we learn as students and as teachers. So I think that is a work that we are doing with all the actors related in this system, emphasizing or focusing in the reflection to face this process. And I think the question was very, very good. Thank you, Mauricio. I don't know if there is any other question, or I can check that in the chat box. There is a question for Denise and Carlos that unfortunately left, but also there is this question from Bayard from Haiti, and they asked if the training strategies have identified the size of the classroom and the student's age. And I think this happens not only in Haiti, where there are classrooms with a lot of children and different students with different ages, and maybe ask you, Mauricio or Michelle, you can also tell us a little bit about your experience in Grenade, and how do you consider this diversity in the classroom, and how do you use this in your experience, or how can you apply this in your experience? Oh, you're still there. Oh yes, I'm still here. They told me the class has not started yet, but what we consider, and that it's in the guidelines, is the educational level. If that is preschool, secondary school, primary school, that's what we see. But the point of the classroom, we didn't consider that explicitly in the file or in the chart or in the guideline. But we considered the reality of the countries. You may deduce, or if you think about Australia, that is something that we mentioned. Classrooms are small, the number of students per classroom. But if we see the case of Dominican Republic, we know that in Dominican Republic, the groups or the classrooms have a numerous amount of students, the same in Haiti. But that's a very, very important question, because there are some things to consider, and also from the individualization criteria, the existing number of students in the classroom.
Yeah, what I can say is that within Grenada, in the early childhood, it is in the classroom, the expected number is 10. And this is pretty much maintained, in that 10 students are allowed in the early childhood, and because of the standards that are being kept, they are expected to have that amount. you may have within the primary and secondary that the expected numbers are sometimes even more than what is actually is supposed to be the number suggested. What you do have in Grenada is a trainee program where you have sort of what we call teacher assistant. So this is also used in the classroom. It is a program which is referred to as the MANI program. So we have persons who are trained in basic teacher ed, that they are also deployed into the schools to assist teachers. So we have that in place in most of the schools where there are large numbers. So it's the classroom is assessed, and teacher trainees are deployed to assist for a period of at least 2 years with some of the larger classes.
Well, I just wanted to ask you if there is any other comment, and if someone is raising their hand. Well, with the work has been mainly focused in secondary school, and we have included some other actions in the late primary school. And the methodologies in general terms, as they are metacognition and feedback. Many of them are in some aspects easy to generalize, and in some other aspects are not easy to generalize. And that's when we work with the teachers, because they have to know, and this conceptualization process is well done, and we can see what are the nuances. And in the work one-on-one with the teacher, when you said personalized instead of individualized, so that's where we have this adjustment in the work with the different types of students. In Chile, rooms in secondary school or classrooms in late primary school or secondary school, you may have 40 students per classroom. And it then, since the collaborative work allows the teacher to work from one to a group in these reflection processes, in this knowledge building, it's easier for the teacher working rather more than with one-on-one students or giving feedback to each one of the students. They can do a group work. Also, we work with tools such as peer-to-peer support. There can be some feedback to the work, and allowing this feedback to have an impact in the results, not feedback that is exposed, but before presenting works, so that feedback is more effective and can be incorporated in the process. In that sense, we work with large classrooms or numerous classrooms, and we are looking for these strategies that allow us to have a greater amount of students. And our partners in Israel, I guess that in a workshop, it was quite interesting to hear that, because our teachers were complaining that this was not okay to be applied, because in Israel they work with less students, and in Israel they replied they work with classrooms of 35 students, and they have had good results. So it is true that it depends on the place and on the situations, but you can work with less students, but the idea is to have these strategies that would allow us to work with a great number of students. Thank you, Mauricio, for your answer and your comments. And we are about to finish. We want to thank Maria Angelica from Guatemala, who told us about the implementation of the strategies in the regulation of learning processes. I don't know if you may want to say what you're doing in Guatemala.
So we will start to close then. We will start to close this webinar now. And I will leave with you now Gisela Simon, Director of the Educational Program, Education Development Management Unit of OECS, and she will give us some closing words.
Hi, a pleasant good afternoon to all. Well, today really marks, or the world celebrates International Literacy Day under the theme Transforming Literacy Spaces. And today's webinar is very timely as children in the OECS returned to the classroom on Monday, the 5th of September. And for many of them, this was reminiscent of the pre-COVID period, as several member states have relaxed on their protocols. Going back to today's observance of International Literacy Day, the theme focuses on transforming literacy spaces. And the link that we have made to this observance and this current or just concluded webinar is the focus on teachers, for teachers to be equipped with the necessary professional development to identify appropriate interventions. And this has been well presented today at this webinar. This webinar reminded all of us that in order to meet students' needs or to cater to students' needs, we must consider their realities. We must consider their individual level and assure them that learning will continue in meaningful and fun ways. Also highlighted today was the need to address or to continue addressing student learning losses. And this, of course, will require teachers to fill in those learning gaps through various assessments and diagnosis, and most importantly, to develop appropriate interventions. With that said, allow me to acknowledge the contributions of our partners, the SUMA and KICS team from Latin America, for their consistent support to the OECS Commission and its member states. To our esteemed moderator and panelists, thanks for sharing your perspectives, your experiences and knowledge on pedagogical strategies and teaching practices in confronting those learning loss. Your insights presented and areas identified for deeper focus through today's webinar will be embedded in shaping future interventions to better support teacher professional development. Some significant themes coming from today's discussions and presentations that I must take the opportunity to reinforce. First, the fact that academic recovery and addressing learning losses are the most critical at this time. Secondly, that the digital divide presents several risks of undermining gains to date with ease access and participation. And as countries recover, we must focus on those. The need to increase access at all levels within the system, despite increased access or issues of teacher quality remains. These issues will have to be addressed, and this calls for us as a region, for the world, in fact, to reshape and transform education, re-engineering teacher professional development. The need to improve access to data to guide the decision-making process. Although there were a significant number of other key messages, these 5 really captures in essence, again, the need for us to really work together as partners. Allow me to take this opportunity on behalf of the SUMA, KICS, and the OECS Commission to thank all partners who have invested time, effort, and resources to making this webinar a reality. The OECS Education Sector Strategy and the OECS Declaration for Education foreground the need for partnerships to implement relevant education interventions, such as the development of culturally relevant content, training of teachers in content development, the revised harmonized OECS primary curriculum, and the implementation of an intersectoral program to support academic recovery. The close level of interagency collaboration has made this webinar possible, and it does not only exemplify our approach to the work that we do, but also our commitment to sharing and working along with key partners, not only in the OECS region, but the wider Caribbean and by extension, globally. Finally, as we close today's webinar, I wish to impress on all of us the need for us to focus on re-engineering teacher professional and education and development in seeking to meet the demands of our 21st century learners. Thank you everyone for the opportunity. And again, kudos and congratulations to our moderator, panelists, and organizers on a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Cicera, for your closing words. Now we are on time, so we are going to go ahead and close. And I would like to ask you if you would, we do want to take a picture. If you could please turn on your cameras so that we can take a picture of the group. Are we ready? Please turn your cameras on so we can take a quick picture. Thank you very much. Give me a second, please. Okay. They're turning the cameras on. Okay, here we go. Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the organizers. And also to Cicera for your closing words. And thank you all for being here today with us. Have a great day and goodbye.